Okay, so what you see here are 68 Chevelle door hinges, top and bottom, and they are already sandblasted, obviously pulled off, and what I want to show is the whole process of rebuilding them. I've rebuilt a set of these before, did all the rebuilding work, and then painted them. And this set, what I want to do is actually break them down and paint them and then reassemble them. I know there'll be a little bit of dinging in reassembly, which will make for some touch-up, but this way it's pretty straightforward. In this area, there's usually a spring, and I've already taken that out. And this little doohickey made life wonderful. The last time I did these springs, I just went ahead with the large channel lock method and shot one of them across the garage. And so I went ahead and found this thing, and it made life a lot easier. You'll see that again when we reassemble. So the first thing I did after sandblasting them was realized, and this is again from experience doing the first set, that the orientation of all the pieces, once you take it all apart, can actually get kind of screwy. So I took individual pictures of each of the hinges, as well as have marked each of the hinges with, that's a DT, so that's driver top, and I went ahead and marked it on the inside with the same orientation, and that is going to remind me which way the pin goes through, as well as I put a P on the top where the pin is going to go through. These wear over years, and these bushings typically will wear out. Usually the bottom bushing wears out more than the top, but the whole thing can get very funky, and usually the top hinge goes more than the bottom hinge. But it's, again, you're restoring a car, you just go ahead and do everything. So I purchased a pin and bushing replacement kit. We'll see that on the reassembly. But in the meantime, what I want to show you is just what it takes to get all this done. Rebuilding a hinge, it can feel overwhelming, and depending on what kind of shop you have and what kind of experience you have, hang in there. The videos out there will help you, give you some ideas, but mostly you just need to have the confidence to kind of tear into it and start figuring it out. So there we are. Okay, so first thing we're going to do here with this hinge is set it back down, move this out of the vise. I was working on that one, I'll get back to that later. So here's this is a hinge without the spring setup on it, and from the factory this pin is kind of swedged on there, and it's not a removable part. So what I'm going to do is cut off these two tabs and then drive this out. You do not have to have air tools. It makes life handy. You can do this with a regular death wheel, chisel, file, sawzall, whatever you feel like. Then I'm going to try to drive it out, and when it's really stuck, on one of them I used a socket, impact socket, to catch the pin. This one I think will come out pretty easy. Comes right through, and yep. I was lucky enough to have a punch that was long enough to get through. Had to go digging in the toolbox though to find it. Really long nail would work. A lot of, whatever gets you through there. This one came apart pretty easy. One of the earlier ones I played with, these bushings were actually a little snug on the hinge, so that'll make on that one it'll make reassembly interesting. So in this case, these two bushings are plastic. One of the bushings I think had been replaced before with a brass one, and one of the top one was brass, bottom one was plastic, and the brass one I ended up using a drill bit to just take off the edge of it and then drive it out from the backside, or finish driving it through the front side. This one, these will probably just pry out with this. Yeah, they're ridiculous. So this is an example of a video not showing how difficult it is. There we go, giving it a little bit more grief. Nice plastic. Okay, pliers. There we go. Bushing out, bushing out. Okay, so while I have it open, I'm going to just inspect the surface that the new brass bushings go into. Are right there, and that will get tapped in, pressed in ever so carefully. So after I paint these, then I will clean up that. Not a lot of point in doing it right now, just because the paint will clog it back up again. But those will get pressed on. Actually, they go in that way, and that way, and the pin gets driven through. And then, so while I've have this apart, I can take the opportunity to knock down any more paint that I want to. The other thing that I'm going to do, these were not rusty. One of the earlier ones had a bunch of corrosion in here and on here, and so that's where I will clean it. I would have cleaned it up. This pin is just a stop. It doesn't really wear. In my case, I was lucky. These hinges were not rusty. I've seen some where they're just a mess. So that was the non-sprung hinge. The sprung hinge has a few more parts to compete with. Again, you've got the spring that sits in there, and then as the door opens, it kind of has that cammed area where it won't swing, and then will swing all the way open. And so what wears on this, and I've seen on other videos and other cars where this roller will completely corrode out from rust, and this pin will be kind of messed up too. Again, in this case, all I'm dealing with is the pin, the main pin with the bushing replacement. So you can see how the orientation of the bushing goes up, goes down like that. So in this one's going to be a little tougher to get out, I'm guessing, but same drill. We're going to just vise it up, cut off those two tabs. And again, you do not have to have these exact tools to do it. I'm sure there's people out there who've got a routine that's even faster than this, but this has been working for me. Now this one, I don't want to go whaling on it because I can just end up bending that and whatnot. So for getting it started, I used a socket here. I think I'm going to use... Oh, let's get the parts out of the way. Again, now that I've got a pile of parts, it's really helpful to have them all marked with passenger top, passenger bottom, the orientation, so that I can just set all these up, paint them, and then reassemble according to the parts and then the orientation of the marking. So that's, I would highly recommend doing that. So up here, let's see if I don't shoot this across the garage. Okay, doesn't like that, need to hit it harder. Gonna go grab a socket. Okay, so we're back and to get this pin out with, I've got a socket that will hold the, won't allow for it all to go through, but will give it perfect support for smashing it out. Okay, that starts it. Now, if we're lucky, where'd the punch go? There it is. If we're lucky, get that all the way out by pushing. Yeah, not so much. Actually it hits the inside of the socket. So now, if that's not too tight, I can just rest it up here. And hopefully, oh, look at that. Nice! Bye-bye. Okay, again, I took pictures early, so remembering the order of all this, it will be easier with that. But bushings go in from the outside. They fit up against these surfaces. this is where, see, I couldn't get to this with sandblast with that. So this is where I will clean this up just a touch right now and show you how I do it. I have the wrong tool set up. Let's get the right tool. And all I'm trying to do is just get to the nice smooth, make sure the metal doesn't have any kind of ridge on it, and kind of polish it down, if you will. Paint's going to go back on there. See how there's a little bit of a high lip around the outside. That's really all it needs. If that gives me too much grief when I'm reassembling, I can always file on it then. You can see from, in the top, definitely clean it. See those little lines in there? Those are dimple marks from the knurls that are on the pin, the replacement pin. And what happens is that also will help you to tell you which way the pin goes in. The pin has those on it, and then as you drive it all through, those will kind of bite into that as such. And then the other part rides on the inside. So, okay, that's that. And take this part. Okay, same drill. Is that a brass one? Yes. Okay, so the brass one on top does not just knock out, I don't think. We'll try it, but usually it's see how it's kind of swelled on the bottom. It won't go out that hole there. I played with that quite a bit on the first one. It's kind of very much stuck in there. So what I did on the last one, and I'm going to try it again, and I think it's the quick solution, is use a step bit. Eats right through the brass really easily. There we go. Okay, so that takes off the top side, and then the smaller punch, I need a too large hammer. Boom. Gone. Now, rust and corrosion, same thing. Polish it off. Make sure you don't have any metal problems. And then, so yeah, there's a raised thing on the bottom. And might end up having to file that a little bit more. Plastic pushing out. And gone. Okay, next time you see these, they will be cleaned up a little better and painted, and then we'll start reassembling. Thank you much. So a little bit of a cautionary tale here. When I started to break these down, I went shopping for the pin kit, and what I found was lots of different pin kits, and grabbed one that wasn't the cheapest, but I was also looking to have it shipped relatively quick, but ended up, again, cautionary tale, ended up on eBay and bought myself a pin kit that only came with 6 of those little bushings. And the 2 steel ones you see are for the pivot rod on the spring door, which I did not need. And that would, those steel ones would go down here if this pivot pin had needed replacing, but it did not. So the brass ones are strictly just going into the axle point or the main pivot point of the door, and that you can see that they are installed there. And anyway, so I've found a couple of loose pins available of all places on Amazon, have those coming on. So I will be able to show you how I am pressing those in. These 2 steel ones won't be using again, but the we'll button up a couple more of the hinges. So that's the cautionary tale. But What I did, as you saw in the first part of the video, is break them down. I had sandblasted them already, cleaned them up a little more once they were apart, and have painted them with a 2-stage flat black automotive quality paint. So they are tough and solid, and have let them cure for a few days. After we assemble them, we'll ding them up a little bit, just holding them in the vise and such, and then we'll spray them a second coat, much thinner coat, just to keep them nice and pretty. But that is where we're starting now, so carry on. Okay, so for reassembly, the first step is to press these bushings into the center part of the hinge, and this is where you want to go back, look at your pictures, make sure you put these in the right way. It is possible to put them in the wrong way, assemble the pin, and then go assemble the hinge, and then go, oh, that's the wrong direction. So, ask me how I know. Anyway, so you set them up. In some cases, these, if the pin or the hinges have gone through a lot of rust, you might have to do some grinding to get this nice and clean. These pins were gross surface rust, but not unserviceable at all. So, as a matter of fact, I don't, on the hinge spring, this pin frequently rots out altogether, and the lower bushing, as I showed in that cautionary tale video right before this about some of the kits only come with certain bushings. That bushing I have, but this pin is in solid condition, no reason to replace it. So then you get back to your orientation, which is where that spring is going to go in later. So, but the pin goes between where the spring is sitting. So, let me get that started. And it goes right together. Okay, so that's the basic operation for the all the hinges. This one's a little trickier because it has that spring detent on it that we will now put in. And let's see how I think I want to do it this way. This little puppy is your favorite tool in the whole world right now. This spring has got a lot of power in it, and yes, you can grab it with vice grips, or excuse me, with channel locks, and squeeze it in there, and it mostly kind of sort of works. I've done this on 2 other hinge rebuilds with the channel locks, and one of them got shot across the garage. Glad I wasn't in harm's way. Glad there wasn't a piece of glass there or window. But in this car, I went ahead and decided to try out this little hinge clamp, and I love it. It works. So, boom, right in. Look how easy that was, kids. So, when you're putting together one of these, it is so much nicer than trying to grab that with channel locks, so I would recommend picking up that tool. All right. Again, I'm going to, now that I've got the hinges back together, I'm going to probably give them one more coat of the automotive paint just to clean up some of the marks on there and pieces that I didn't spray or didn't get good access to spraying. All right. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.